Greetings YouTube, I'm Evening, and I'm here to tell you about games you've probably never heard about. Today, I want to ask and answer one simple question. Should you play The Legend of Oasis? Let's begin with, what even is The Legend of Oasis? It's a successor and a prequel to the Sega Genesis game Beyond Oasis, on which I did a video last week. Check it out here. Initially, it was planned to be made for the Sega Genesis add-on, the 32X. The idea was scrapped, and the game ended up finding its home within the Sega Saturn in 1996. Welcome back to the world of Oasis. Well, actually, long before it was called Oasis. You play as Leon, a young man whose warrior master gives the golden armlet to and tasks with a mission. Become the Spirit King by finding the 6 spirits and stop Agito and his evil forces that are growing in the world. Just like its predecessor, the game boasts fantastic and sharp pixel art. From enemies to areas and finishing with effects, everything in-game looks breathtaking. This time around, there are even more enemies with even more variants to gawk at. But sadly, the dungeons and the overworld don't have the same strong identity as every area had in Beyond Oasis. Don't get me wrong, it's not every area. A couple dungeons have a very strong and unique identity, but others feel quite similar to one another. Another thing that feels a little lacking visually is the overworld. With how it worked in Beyond Oasis, a lot of dungeons were like tunnels that got you from one part of the overworld to another. This, plus the ever-changing terrain and colors, gave the feeling that the world you played in was big. In Legend of Oasis, this doesn't happen. The world feels very small. There's only really 3 places you go to in the game. Your town, the forest on the left, and the scorched area up north. That's it. All the dungeons and all the places of interest are there. And in between all these areas, there are only 4 screens that separate it. The world feels quite claustrophobic. What doesn't feel minimal, however, are the animations. Leon moves so smoothly, every move he pulls off looks strong and impactful, every single different attack you do has its own animations, and you can easily tell them apart. Every hit against the enemies with a sword produces a fantastic metal sound. The magic attacks all sound meaty when they need to, and soothing when that's their intention. And don't worry, the guttural screams of absolute terror from the enemies do return. This time, they are even more prevalent. The music now is a bit more of a mixed bag. Both Legend of Oasis and the previous game's soundtracks were composed by Yuzo Koshiro. Just on a fundamental level, the music is good. It sounds great, there's plenty of it, and it feels appropriate for the moment when it plays. But I prefer the soundtrack of Beyond, as Legend didn't leave me wanting more. I didn't feel like I had any desire to continue listening to the soundtrack afterwards. And, well, there were also the problems that made me feel bitter about the OST. Randomly, and I do mean randomly, I could be walking down an empty corridor, backtracking, then suddenly, the music gets loud. So loud, I have to take off my headphones as I can't hear anything, and it becomes so uncomfortable. And when it calms down, this kept happening again and again and again. And after multiple hours of it, you kinda can't bring yourself to love the music. This might be a problem only I come across, as I couldn't find anything online, so this just might be me getting unlucky or something breaking with emulation. I'm not gonna hold it against the game, but it did make the experience worse. What I will hold against the game is the other reason why I'm not particularly fond of the music. The amount of times I had to listen to it, while either backtracking or returning back to a spot for a jump, failing, and once again, doing a shameful walk back while hearing the same tunes. To look at The Legend of Oasis as a whole, it's a perfect sequel to Beyond Oasis. It takes everything the first game did, expands the good, multiplies the parts that felt too few, even doubling the length of the game to over 10 hours, and it even tries to do something different with aspects that were in one way or another a bit lacking in the original. The problem comes when some of this inflation doesn't benefit it, and this shows off mostly with dungeons. Dungeons in Beyond started off very simple and linear, and as the game progressed, they got more complex, bigger, and more maze-like. The first dungeon in Legend of Oasis already feels like a midway point in Beyond, and then they just keep expanding and getting more complex at an exponential rate. A lot of this complexity comes from the tools Leon has. While Ali had bombs and his spirits for puzzles, Leon, on top of those, has weapon enchantments that can move objects or special weapon attacks that can hit objects out of reach. You have a very big arsenal of tools. The problem, and one of the biggest aspects of the puzzles, comes from you only being able to hold one tool at a time. You can only have a single spirit or one enchantment on hand. So if a puzzle requires the use of multiple, you either have to scour the area for hidden ways to summon your spirit friends, or just backtrack. And here comes my biggest gripe. Things don't stay solved after you leave. It might be fun to have to backtrack to summon a spirit for solving this one puzzle a single time, but doing it every time you move through an area is annoying. And the worst part is that this isn't even consistent. Some parts remain solved, others need you to do the whole switcheroo game every single time, and then you have to keep doing it over and over again when you backtrack to heal up or after dying, so it all just kinda gets infuriating to a level of boredom. This is probably my biggest and my only real problem with the game. Being stuck in the dungeon gets boring by the end. Everything else about it, however, is amazing. The puzzles, when you aim repeating them multiple times, are fantastic. Discovering how to manipulate the environment to get the spirits you need is fun. The complexity of some puzzles is great, especially when the puzzle turned out to be bigger than it initially seemed. The way dungeons a lot of times were interconnecting with other dungeons was so fantastic. Also, the exploration felt very rewarding. Once again, we get gems to power up the spears from hidden chests, but now, another reward we can acquire are scrolls to expand the capacity of weapon enchantments. Once again, a lot of chests are behind puzzles that, when you first discover them, you can't reach because you lack the necessary tools. However, in Legend of Oasis, this teasing of things you can do in the future feels a lot better than Beyond, as now, you progressing includes backtracking to old dungeons. As such, going back to the hidden gems doesn't feel that tedious. Let's talk more about the things expanded in the sequel. All the favorite spirits from the last game have returned, with their kits being only slightly changed in some aspects. For example, the plant no longer chomps on doors, but now digs holes. In addition to the old, we also get a couple of new additions. Some of them are very voluptuous additions. While the sound spirit, named Brass, mostly exists as a way to break through a new obstacle created for the game, the new air spirit, though, provides a mechanic that changes so much of the game and opens up so many areas once you get her. You can ride on top of her and float. Both of them feel like a great addition to the already existing arsenal of spirits. Another part of those expanded were the enemies. We have the return of the majority of the bad guys, with some changes, and a lot of new additions. Most notably would probably be the ghost enemies, that can only be permanently killed using a special enchantment. Another part about the enemies is that now they feel a lot harder. Not only do they feel a lot tankier, but also, if you are not careful and don't treat the enemies with the respect they deserve, you can easily get stun locked and just eat their attacks for a good while. The difficulty of the enemies might also stem from the fact that you start the game with very little health. But as you progress, mainly heal yourself with food or other means, your rank increases and so does your health bar. Let's talk about those enchantments I keep mentioning. But to get to that, let me explain the weapon situation so it makes a lot more sense. In Beyond Oasis, you had a whole bag of weapons with limited durability. Now just 4 of those weapons remain. They are all unbreakable, and they all have their own special attack combos that follow fighting game rules. You have a bow, a longsword, a staff, and the return of your trusty dagger. With how the weapons function in Legends of Oasis, I think the dagger, which was the main workhorse of Beyond, was my least used weapon. I just gravitate towards the other weapons more, and this does mostly come from the fact that the dagger does not get any enchantments. As such, it's not even used in puzzles, so you just kinda don't use it that much. So now, the enchantments. Every weapon, excluding the dagger, has 2 special modes that can be achieved by either getting your spirit to power you up, or finding special power balls. For example, your staff can get the Purification enchantment, which instantly and permanently kills the dead, and also makes the plants become jump pads. On the other hand, we have the bow, getting the power of sound, which lets the arrows become piercing, while the last example would be your longsword becoming able to crush stone. These enchantments really add a lot of variety to how you approach combat scenarios, not only puzzles, as depending on what weapon you have on hand, the way you prioritize enemies changes, as some are weak to specific damages and so on. Lastly, of course, in your arsenal you once again have bombs. Just this time they work simpler, they now have their own dedicated button, and that's it. They can be used for both puzzles or combat, once again. One of the most important places where you'll use all these weapons are the boss fights. The bosses are so much better. While majority of the fights in Beyond were just beat up the stronger enemy, a lot of bosses here have a gimmick to their fights, which really enhances the fights, sometimes turning them into little puzzles, making it more interesting. But sadly, even though fighting the bosses was better, there were no bosses that visually floored me like a couple from Beyond did. The last part I need to mention in reference to big changes between the two games is the inventory system. The inventory, that a lot of times became an easy get out of a sticky situation card in Beyond, is just gone. Leon doesn't store apples in his pants. If he sees a piece of meat, he is just gonna eat it. As such, all the healing and mana rejuvenation is out of your hands. Rather than being a conscious decision you make mid-combat, now it's something you have to deal with before a fight. I don't think it's a bad system, neither was the Beyond's answer to regaining health. They are just different approaches to a problem. They both work well in their own games. As the dungeons are built around the idea of you backtracking for the health circles, a lot of times these areas feel like your main safe rooms for dungeon levels, which does give some nice structure to the conquering of the area. Another thing that these saved rooms have are circles for saving. No more saving than you want in the overworld. No more checkpoints for areas. You get save points and you better use them. It's sad to lose the checkpoint system from Beyond, as I really enjoyed it. What this new system does for The Legend of Oasis is that it adds even more backtracking to areas, which is not a good thing for a game where so much of it is already built around going back to places from before. Even though The Legend of Oasis has more characters than Beyond, even though you can have a lot of interactions and even see character developments in these people and directly help them at times, I enjoyed Beyond Oasis' story more for one simple reason: the silver armlet. Beyond had a villain that you pursued, that mocked you, and that directly opposed you. Legend doesn't. You get glances of the bad guys mocking you from time to time, but they don't feel threatening nor interesting. Nothing beats silver armlet kicking you down to a dungeon, or him being just taken away from all the action by a gargoyle as he mocks you. In return, the game gives you a love interest, who is just not interesting whatsoever. The game might have one of the least convincing romances I have ever seen. Even the village hottie would have been better than what the game offered. So, to answer the question, should you play The Legend of Oasis? Yes, you should. It's a fantastic game that features great visuals, nice music, fun and engaging gameplay, and numerous dungeons filled with tough enemies and even tougher puzzles. While the story may be lacking and some aspects of the dungeon get tiring, this doesn't change the fact that Legend of Oasis is a gem you should play. Thanks for watching, greatly appreciated. Check out my other Should You Play videos, or check out my other channel, Evening Man, for longer, more in-depth videos on games you probably never heard about. See you next time. I've been Evening, and this has been The Legend of Oasis.